So today I'm comparing expensive lures with their cheap counterparts. I've been trawling the internet and I've found lots of cheap ones of all those more expensive lures that we use when we're lure fishing for bass. So I'll be testing them underwater to see if the action is any different between the two. I'll also be looking at the finish of the lures, the strength of the hook, and also how well they cast. And is it worth spending a little bit more to get the real thing than the copy? Or is it the copy and the real thing? Right, first up, out into the grey day then, the Momo cheapie. I'll see how far we go with this and then give it a go with the expert one. I'll cast that too high. So a few casts with those. The original is actually, I'm probably getting about 5 or 6 metres more. So for some reason, I am getting further though, definitely on the original Momo 2. Again, you can see this shape, the actual shape of them is exactly the same, isn't it? No real differences. It does show the original one does go a bit rusty though. You see mine's gone a bit rusty. So you can see the weighting is the same. They've copied where those weighted bearings are. Got 2 there, got 2 there, and it's the same inside that Momo as well. For all intents and purposes, the weight is exactly the same, I think. Just put single hooks on my one, so there you go. I suppose you can decide on the finish whether the quality of finish on the Momo will scratch away. This is a well used one. Well, what do you think of the action then? This is the original Momo. You can see it's a subsurface lure, but it's very high up in that water table. You just pick out the difference between the lure and the reflection. Obviously how you retrieve makes a difference. This is the Momo version, and I think it seems to be a little bit more of a head down sort of action, and then it wobbles more left to right, left to right, left to right. More of a tail wobble there. Can't really get much variety out of the retrieve. Tried it fast and slow, but yeah, certainly it works, doesn't it? It works as a lure. I mean, I haven't caught fish on it yet. The bass ultimately will decide, but like a lot of the lures in this test, it's showing what they look like underwater, the difference we can have as anglers and what we do with a rod tip. One day I hope to have some footage of a bass coming up to take one. For me, not much difference between these two. Some of these lures are a bit closer, as we'll see. Well, these two look exactly the same, don't they? The Momo and the Do Live stick. The Do Live stick's this one on the top, and it is slightly oilier. It's got that sort of sand in it to give it a little bit more weight. It's exactly the same, isn't it? Anything you might say, I mean, I know they discolour in the box, but I think the Do Live is just keeping its whiteness a little bit better. But other than that, they're exactly the same, aren't they? They've obviously just taken the mould from the Do Live stick, that the Momo company. So where there is a difference is in the hooks. You get your hooks thrown in with the Momos for the same price as just the plastic. So that's it really. You're just looking at hooks as the difference. Okay, the Do Live stick and the other one. I'll have to rig them exactly the same as well, just so there's no bias. Well, I don't even know if there's any point in comparing these two. I mean, they are pretty much exactly the same. You might find there's a better quality. Well, that flies. The hook might be slightly weightier on one, you know, so you can frame the shot.
Yeah.
Right, so drifting down. It's interesting the variety of sort of retrieves you can do with the do live sticks. You've obviously got that sort of flicking thing and letting them drift, letting them drop down. Anything you do to them does tend to bring them up to the surface quite quickly. But again, there's no real difference between the two makes here. So just go with what's the cheapest, I think. Definitely some lessons to be learnt in how to retrieve them. Some rods are better suited for this as well, certainly using braid and fluorocarbon, but you know, if you had a softer tip rod or a harder tip rod, can really change some of the action you can put into these. Well, if I've learnt anything here, I'm going to be using these stick baits a little bit more this summer, but in terms of between the two, just go, maybe get both. Not seeing too much difference between these two either. The Tide Minnow, that's the expensive one, and then this one here is a company in the West Country, and they've always stated that they want to make bass angling more affordable, and they're certainly doing it with this. If you look at the prices here, so yeah, nothing much between them. But I think the biggest thing to consider here are the quality of the hooks. From our apparent imposter, they're really good quality. So obviously they're not entirely the same lure, they do act slightly differently. They are subsurface lure, Tide Minnow sinking a little bit quicker, but the Tide Minnow is one of my best casters, absolutely flies, so it'd be interesting to see how they compare. Well, it casts absolutely fine. There's nothing in it. I've made a big thing about the casting. There's nothing between the two lures in that sense. Well, it's really blustery. We're going to be casting into this wind. And just see how they perform, and actually going quite windy is probably quite good. Just going to be using the cobalt rod, which is slightly heavy really, 15 to 35 grams. The Shimano reel here, Ultegra, and then the Corda leader. I'm just going to put about 2 foot on there. We're not fishing today. I just want to make it the same for each of these lures. So let's have a look and see how it casts. I'm going to be comparing the two lures in these very blustery conditions. So in many ways it is important how far you can cast the lures. The fish might be feeding at a distant point. If you can't reach it, you're not going to catch. So not always the case, but we'll give this a little trial. Maybe a little bit more greeny the eye when you look at the eye on the original Zonk. Reflects it a little bit to the human eye out of water. So of course obviously it does depend on the bass. Both of them do have the vent in it, see at the top here, and that actually whistles when you cast. The idea being, I think, that it just disrupts the water a little bit in that vent, but they've still got it over here on the fake one. Probably the material for that lip as well, maybe that's, I mean this can crack. This is fiberglass I think on the original. Obviously it's just a thin plastic here. Does it really matter? You can see the finish. Hooks obviously the big important thing. I can visually see these hooks aren't as good quality. When I mean quality, it's things like the strength of them and how much they're going to rust. You do get excellent quality hooks on the Zonk. They do vary across the Zonk range, but they are definitely a better material, stronger material than you're going to get in the Momo lures one. Right, so we'll do a few casts with the budget version and then see if our original Zonk can match it. Takes a while to correct that lure just to get it down, sort of splashes on the surface for a bit. Might not be a bad thing. I think a bit of a longer drop on that. It'd be great if we got a fish. It's not actually a lure fishing mark here, it's just one of the beach marks I go to occasionally. You never know. Now for the original. Boom. Yeah, we'll do a few more, but I think the original zonk definitely cast further. So what we're looking at here then is the Momo lure. It's a sinking lure, so it sinks down and you're kind of keeping the nose up a little bit more than you would on the zonk. The zonk likes to drop almost tail first, whereas the Momo version just seems a little bit top heavy really. It's got more of a wobble, that sort of rear end wobble again, left to right action. I prefer this action on the zonk. It seems a little bit more like a bait fish moving through the water. As I say, this does sink the zonk, so a nice reminder that they are easy to snag. Just seems to be a little bit more horizontal in the water than the Momo version. Again, take your pick. So there you go, victory for the zonk in some ways there. Whether that's worth £20 extra, maybe something you need to decide. And as a bonus tip, just look how noticeable that braid is in the water. It really does flash the braid, and that's why I like a longer leader really. Just another benefit of filming these underwater. Still works okay, picking up a bit of weed in the hooks as well. Well, this is the biggest price difference between two. The dark sleeper here at the top, although it's a little bit bigger obviously. The closest I could find was this one here, which pro rata is going to be about £1, and I've seen these for sale for 20 quid, so the biggest difference. But there are some differences here. This is so obviously it's got like the hook is in the fin, and these flaps are a little bit thicker and not as soft as the ones here. Now a bass will absolutely, the bass won't be bothered, it'll hammer through those, but it does help to have like a thinner rubber at the top. Fin moves nicely. This one's a little bit stiffer, and I think when we come on to see it underwater we'll see the biggest difference. So I had a bit of help filming and retrieving these lures with Mark from Manic Fishing, and we both agreed the biggest difference in action was between these two. The cheap Amazon version is just it's shit. It doesn't look like a fish at all, whereas the Mega Bass one, we laughed at the price of it, but it's actually really realistic, isn't it? It's got that sort of consistent tail action, but also it darts around a little bit like a rockling would. So yeah, I mean, it would be pointless getting the Amazon one here. +1 then for the original. Probably getting about 15 metres more each cast. Well, one's a pachinko and one isn't. Can you tell the difference? really close, these ones. Original eye maybe looks a bit better. These are some old hooks that I've had on this old pachinko, pulling out of a snag. I don't know, I think this could possibly be one of the closest ones, one of the ones to go for. What do you think, just looking at them? You've got a weighted ball in its rear end which helps it cast, and when we look at them cast you'll see the difference that might make. So with all these pachinko type lures, there's no real difference in the retrieve. It's just the distance that you can cast. With the original is slightly more, particularly on the 100. So having a look through here, I mean, all of them have rattles. This is a Rapala version. Blue one here is the genuine pachinko. Some older ones, I think it was an Axia used to make one. But my favourite again is bassluresuk.com. I would definitely get yourself a pachinko just to see the difference in the casting. There's not much in the retrieve, but again, the larger pachinko sizes with that company in Cornwall, who I'm not sponsored by, it's worth checking it out. So there are other options, of course, for lures for bass on the internet. If you've got any ideas or anything you want to add, then do let everyone know, so we can get a really good list going. And if you want to see what particular hard lure by more of a mid-range lure manufacturer caught the most bass for me last year, I'll leave a link to that video here in the top right hand corner. You can check that out. Thanks for watching.